Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at some very fun battles from the Master League featuring a level 50, fully maxed out, perfect IV Zapdos. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Erickson, so many thanks for the battle submission. Erickson mentioned in the battle submission notes that he had run Zapdos in the Master League before, but found it a little underwhelming. But this season with the Thundershock buff, after trying it again, found that it held its own a lot better. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a look at level 50 Zapdos in the Open Master League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a bad lead, leading Zygarde into Zacian, so we will see a safe switch, and in comes Zapdos. Erickson did mention in the notes that he wanted to try and find the bulkiest Master League Pokemon possible to pair with the Zapdos, because Zapdos will often require one or both shields just about every game. The shield is used on the wild charge. Now the defense is at -2, so they're forced to commit a shield back on the drill peck. Opponent does actually end up overfarming too much. They let the Zapdos get to a second drill peck, and now the Zapdos was able to grab shield advantage. Thought about making a switch out to try and catch onto the Zygarde there. Now we're going to see the switch into the Zygarde. Oh my goodness, is this the wild charge catch? The answer is yes. Triple resisted wild charge catch. In comes Xerneas. And unfortunately, this is not much better for the Zygarde. Zygarde is going to be smacked with a Moonblast that does devastating damage, and Zygarde going to return fire with the Earthquake. Earthquake is going to connect, doing some solid damage to the Xerneas, but this is a war of pacing that Zygarde cannot possibly win. Zygarde makes it to the crunch, but loses the charge attack priority tie. Xerneas able to, oh, they don't quite pick up the knockout with the close combat. I thought that was going to KO, but no, Zygarde hanging on, able to deal some very crucial damage. And now Solgaleo hits the field of battle. Solgaleo more than happy to absorb a close combat here from the Xerneas. They went for a blind Moonblast, anticipating a switch into the Zapdos. In the back is Ho-Oh, and now things are looking a bit tough. Going for the Psychic Fangs debuff, and then will look to switch into the Zapdos. Opponent is going to send in the Zacian. Zapdos farming up as much as it possibly can and going for the Drill Peck. The Ho-Oh switching out does mean they did reset the defense debuff, so now can a Thunderbolt KO here? Thunderbolt from the Zapdos picks up the knockout after one more Thundershock, and that's a good game. The leads are not getting better in the next match, leading into Xerneas. We're going to see the safe switch into the Zapdos. Zapdos is going to fire off the Thunderbolt and win a CMP tie over Xerneas. Thunderbolt is going to connect, dealing some pretty significant damage. Zapdos is going to let this through as the Moonblast connects. Opponent now going to send out Rhyperior. I mean, considering you have a Solgaleo in the back, it is very good to bait out the Rhyperior. I'm a bit surprised the opponent didn't switch in the Rhyperior instantly, because of course Rhyperior would be a wall to this energy. And now Erickson can send back in the Zygarde. Zygarde is looking to absorb this energy, neutralize the Rhyperior, and then try and sweep, if at all possible, with the Solgaleo. Rhyperior did go for the Rock Wrecker first, and now they're going to fire off a second Rock Wrecker as well. They actually switch out. They send in Zacian, so this is an ABA Fairy team. Earthquake is going to connect, but this could be a pretty difficult game to win. Solgaleo farming up a ton of energy. Opponent is going to fire off a move, and we're going to see a no shield. It is going to be the wild charge that connects. Opponent throws on alignment there, and they are going to now take that fire spin at -4 defense and get fully farmed down. Back in comes Rhyperior. Rhyperior going to be debuffed with the Psychic Fangs, also threatening a potential Iron Head and able to grab a shield. Firing off another Psychic Fangs. This Psychic Fangs into Rhyperior is going to be double shielded. There's a switch out to the Zygarde. Zygarde dealing massive damage. Opponent sends in the Xerneas. They undo the debuffs, but Xerneas is so far behind on energy. Earthquake is going to KO. Back in comes Rhyperior. They just get fully farmed down, and that game somehow ends in a win. Decent lead in the next match. Zygarde into Mewtwo. Opponent safe switches into an Annihilate, but I'll be honest, I was not expecting to see this here whatsoever. And this is 2300 elo, so at this point of the season, it's a pretty solid spot to be. But Annihilate was definitely not on my bingo card. Crunch into the Annihilate is going to be no shielded. There's the switch into Zapdos. Zapdos is going to make it to the Drill Peck, as that Thundershock pacing is absolutely terrific. Drill Peck is going to pick up the KO. Back in comes Mewtwo, but Mewtwo is actually going to be outpaced because Zapdos is now on its 4 cycle. Drill Peck is shielded. Mewtwo farming up a ton of energy, and they're going to fire off a move right before Zapdos gets Drill Peck number 2. Shadow Mewtwo going for the Psy Strike. Now they're going to be hit with another Drill Peck. Are they really willing to double shield here? The answer is yes. We see a switch out into the Zygarde, preserving the Zapdos for later, saying that if they're shielding, they could very well be weak. Psy Strike connects. That deals some pretty significant damage. In the back is Landorus. So not necessarily weak to the Zapdos, but Landorus does need a Stone Edge if it wants to do any meaningful damage. Landorus wants the farm down and gets the farm down, and this energy is quite scary. In comes the Solgaleo. Solgaleo farming up. The opponent has so much energy, but one Sandsear Storm will not be enough to knock out. Solgaleo can survive there. We see a switch to the Zapdos. Zapdos now has a call to make. Is this the Stone Edge? Erickson says yes and gets that call right, but there's the combo play. In comes the Mewtwo. Mewtwo Psy Strike picks up the knockout, and it's all up to Solgaleo to try and close out this game. Solgaleo going for the Psychic Fangs, hoping for a Fire Spin farm down before a Shadow Ball is reached. Oh, the opponent gets damage registration error. Is this the Shadow Ball? No, it's just the Psy Strike. That won't KO. Back in comes the Landorus. Can this Psychic Fangs pick up the knockout? It does. That game looked doomed, but with careful play, it ends in a win. Moving to the next match, Zygarde versus Palkia. This is a match where having Outrage would be very nice on the Zygarde, but of course this trainer not running it, so instead they're just going to settle for a Crunch. Crunch into the Palkia is going to be no shielded. We do not see a defense drop, and now the opponent is threatening a Spatial Rend. We see the shield. There's the Spatial Rend from the opponent. The save switch out into the Duskmane Necrozma. Duskmane going to be chipped with a Crunch. Crunch is going to be shielded, and honestly, Necrozma is a pretty difficult Pokemon for this team to face. I like the no shield here on the Zygarde. Make them go for the Sunsteel, or in this case, the Outrage. Oh no, and now we have the Battle of Lions, Solgaleo versus Necrozma. If they're on Outrage, then they're typically on Outrage Ironhead, which means their moveset would actually be walled here, and they are. They do go for the Outrage. Erickson gonna try and go for a Psychic Fangs to lower their defense, and then go for a farm down here. We see an aggressive switch into Zapdos. Zapdos is going to no shield. It's just gonna be the Ironhead. That's not gonna do a lot of damage. In the back is Zacian, and we've seen that Zacian, it looks like 2 charge moves do come pretty close to knocking out here. Going for the harder hitting Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is able to connect, and that does some very, very nice damage. Firing off the Drill Peck. Drill Peck is going to be shielded. Zacian, so much energy loaded, and I think you might have to let this go. Commits the shield or get a catch. There's the catch right on cue. Very nicely done. Able to preserve that Zapdos. In comes the Palkia. Palkia going to be knocked out with the Drill Peck, but Zapdos now has to try and 1v3, and that's a very tall task. Opponent still has the Zacian, and they still have Duskmane. In comes the Zacian, able to make it to the Drill Peck. How healthy is that Duskmane? I believe it's very low, but the Zapdos is low as well. This is going to be a race. Thundershock versus Shadow Claw, and the opponent with a fraction of HP left is able to win the game. Well, a chance for redemption in the next match. The exact same lead. Zygarde into Palkia. Zygarde very happy to stay in here and play this out. Opponent farms up to the exact energy needed for a Spatial Rend, and they do go for a bait. That's a bit unfortunate for the Zygarde. Zygarde farming up a ton of energy, now going for a Crunch. Crunch is going to be no shielded by the Palkia. Palkia does not get to the Spatial Rend. And in comes Duskmane. Duskmane going to be met with a Crunch. Not having Palkia to deal with in the endgame will definitely be a help. Zygarde farming up a ton of energy, making it to another Crunch as the opponent is just trying to max out on energy before throwing a move. The opponent does end up giving up a shield. Zygarde finally now going to be hit with energy. If they undercharge, you can just switch out. They go for the Dark Pulse, and it will be able to pick up a knockout. In comes Solgaleo. Solgaleo can survive a Dark Pulse. It will do a lot of damage, but this is the benefit of running a Pokemon as bulky as Solgaleo. You can actually absorb those hits. In the back is Ho-Oh, and in comes Zapdos. No baits here from the Zapdos, going straight for the Thunderbolt, looking to punish a no shield, but the opponent does end up committing the shield. Opponent will go for the Sacred Fire. It's a 50-50 chance at an attack drop. Zapdos does get its attack debuffed here, and Zapdos wins the CMP tie over the Ho-Oh. KO. Zapdos, Thunderbolt is debuffed. It will not quite pick up the knockout. That Sacred Fire attack drop coming in clutch for the opponent. Brave Bird is going to land. Back in comes Duskmane and will immediately be debuffed by the Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs is going to connect. The next Fire Spin will pick up the knockout, and this should be a win as Solgaleo makes it to another Psychic Fangs. So this team finding unorthodox ways to win as we see Solgaleo KOing the remnants of a Ho-Oh. Picking up a good lead in the next match, Zygarde versus Duskmane Necrozma. But anytime you see a Duskmane lead, the thought has to be in the back of your head. There's probably a Palkia lurking somewhere in the back, and how do I beat the Palkia? And if you end up with Solgaleo on the Palkia, you're not going to have a great day as Fire Spins do less than nothing. Opponent throws on 8 and on alignment, which is a massive surprise. It is going to be Outrage, and now we see the safe switch, and in comes Solgaleo. I mean, if they showed Outrage, they're not going to have Dark Pulse. They will have Iron Head, so you are going to be a wall here. Oh, they are actually on Outrage Sunsteel. In comes Rhyperior. And unfortunately, this is not enough for a potential Solar Beam, but the opponent ends up respecting it. They respect it in case it's an Iron Head. An Iron Head would not have been enough to knock out. So now the opponent is 2 stages debuffed, and in comes Zygarde. But there is so much work that this Zapdos is going to have to do in this endgame. Zygarde makes the crunch, loses the CMP tie, and unfortunately, you're kind of forced to shield, and the opponent does get the attack drop. That is unfortunate. Going for the crunch. Crunch is shielded. It's a simultaneous switch out. Zapdos into Kyogre. Zapdos farming up as much energy as it possibly can and using the last shield here. Wanting to get close to 100 energy before throwing that Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt will inflict massive super effective damage onto Kyogre. Thunderbolt is going to connect. That's going to pick up the knockout. Back in comes Rhyperior, and Rhyperior unfortunately has undone those 2 defense drops. That means Drill Peck not going to do a lot. Able to make a second Drill Peck. Can this pick up the knockout here? That would be huge. Zapdos does not pick up the knockout. Opponent switches out, and in comes the Zygarde. Zygarde able to absorb Rhyperior's energy, and I think we're going to see the impossible. Zapdos Thundershocking down a ground type to take the win. These sets have had some absolutely wild win cons. Moving into the next match, Zygarde versus Yveltal. This Zygarde, of course, not running Outrage, but ideally you still want to bluff like you do in case you can trick the opponent into shielding. They will go for the Oblivion Wing. Oblivion Wing, of course, is going to be the better move to throw neutrally compared to Dark Pulse. The opponent does not fall for the bait. The Crunch does get a defense drop, but now Dark Pulse will do quite a bit of damage. Opponent will go for the Dark Pulse. That's hard-hitting damage. In comes Landorus. Landorus will be met with a Drill Peck. Drill Peck is going to do some pretty okay damage. I mean, not a ton. I believe this is only 6 mud shots, which would make this a Sandsear Storm that is going to be single resisted. It comes close to knocking out, but it does not. And that means this Drill Peck, even though it's debuffed, will get to land. Opponent is going to look for a farm down. Erickson not going to let that happen, preserving the Zapdos on very low HP for a catch later and sending in Zygarde. Zygarde debuffed by the Sandsear Storm. In comes Duskmane. Duskmane will immediately be met with a debuffed Crunch. Crunch not going to do a lot of damage. If the opponent wants a farm down, another Crunch will be reached. Opponent not going to let that happen. They do decide to fire off energy, and Dark Pulse will pick up the knockout. At this point, you basically have a Solgaleo and 3 shields to win the game. 2 actual shields and an ability to catch on a 1 HP Zapdos. The first shield comes out from the Solgaleo. Solgaleo needs the KO in 4 fire spins here, but the opponent lives on 1 HP. That is disastrous as that forces the final shield. And now you really just have to try and farm things down, and the opponent makes a devastating peekaboo catch, catching the flamethrower onto the Landorus. And now as the Solgaleo, you just have to go for Psychic Fangs and try and hope for a fire spin farm down. Opponent will commit the shield, looking for the farm down. Is this a range where it could be a simultaneous KO? It's going to be close. In comes the Zapdos. No, the Yveltal lives on 1 HP, and the opponent has to be counting their lucky stars after the back-to-back 1 HP survives, win them that game. Hopping into the final match, leading into another Yveltal, but this one is the shiny. An absolutely terrific shiny at that. Opponent throws on alignment again. Honestly, 2300s is pretty solid elo for this time of the season, so I'm a little bit surprised to see as many throws on alignment as I have been. Here, we are actually going to see a switch out and a catch by the opponent. Very nicely done. Catching and getting the sneak onto a shiny Zacian. And man, I wonder if the third Pokemon is going to be a shiny as well. They farm up to 8. So they should be going for a Wild Charge or a Close Combat here, but in this case they actually are going for a Play Rough. Play Rough, of course, will not lower their defense, but in exchange, it's not going to do a lot of damage. Flamethrower is going to land. This will be the Wild Charge or the Close Combat, but Solgaleo, not in any fear in this moment, able to tank that and get a full farm down. In comes Yveltal. Yveltal is going to fire off energy, choosing just to sacrifice the energy on the Solgaleo. Because now it is time. Zapdos hits the field of play. Opponent is going to switch out. They're going to send in Duskmane as their final Pokemon. No baits here from the Zapdos, straight for the Thunderbolt. It's going to connect, dealing some solid neutral damage. Zapdos farming up, I believe through the Drill Peck 1 before the Thunderbolt, but at this point, even a Drill Peck would start to get the opponent very low. There's a switch out into the Zygarde just to force the opponent to throw energy. We are going to see the Sunsteel Strike from Duskmane, and down goes Zygarde. Back in comes the Zapdos. Zapdos will have to manage its health very carefully here as these Shadow Claws are adding up. In comes Yveltal. Yveltal will be able to pressure the final shield, but the issue for the opponent is they're just going to get farmed down, and now Zapdos exits very close to 100 energy. Back in comes the Duskmane. No baits here from Erickson. Will the opponent respect it? The answer is yes. Zapdos barely able to hang on, making the last second Thunderbolt, knocking out Duskmane, and that is a good game. All in all, these are some very fun battles with Zapdos, and there were a couple moments where you could definitely see the Thundershock buff making a bit of a difference. Zapdos to me still remains firmly as a spice pick in the Master League, so not a Pokemon that I would recommend using if you're looking to gain Elo. But overall, it's a very cool mon. It almost gets to 4,000 combat power, which I do tend to forget, so it has some pretty solid stats overall. But realistically, at the current moment, being an electric type doesn't do you a ton of favors in a Rhyperior meta, so maybe in a future meta, it might see a little bit more play, but for now, it remains a very fun, spicy Pokemon. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. Thank you guys oh so very much, and until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.